Hi, this is the AI Storyteller. I'm Mark. The featured work for this issue is the masterpiece of British literary giant William Makepeace Thackeray, Vanity Fair. Before delving into the main topic, let me share a short story. One day in November 1852, on a train journey from Boston to New York, a newsboy walked through the carriages, calling out along the way, asking if anyone wanted Thackeray's books. In one carriage, he sold a copy of an early work by Thackeray with a red cover to a middle-aged man. Surprisingly, this middle-aged man was none other than Thackeray himself. A few days later, he was about to embark on a nationwide lecture tour across the United States. This tour was a great success, and Thackeray received a warm welcome from Americans wherever he went. In that year, Thackeray was in his early 40s, enjoying great prestige, and had become a novelist of equal renown to Dickens in the English-speaking world. Thackeray's writing career didn't start late, but he remained in relative obscurity for a long time until he established a solid position in the literary world around the age of 40. From any perspective, he can be considered a late-blooming writer, and his journey to America allowed him to truly experience the taste of worldwide recognition. It can be said that the publication of a book completely changed his destiny, and that book was Vanity Fair, published in 1848. Thackeray's full name is William Makepeace Thackeray. He was born in 1811 in Calcutta, India, to a father who was an official of the British East India Company and a mother who was a local socialite. Thackeray lost his father at the age of 4, and his mother remarried a military officer. Like many children of British Empire officials stationed abroad at that time, he was sent to England at the age of 6 to receive a rigorous aristocratic education. At the age of 18, Thackeray entered Cambridge University, but the following year, he dropped out to travel to the European continent. He spent most of his time in the Grand Duchy of Weimar, where he took the opportunity to visit the renowned German literary figure Goethe, who held an important position in Weimar. Upon returning to England, he initially aimed to pursue a career in the legal field, but soon abandoned that path and hoped to inherit his family's fortune. However, fate had other plans as a bank failure in India resulted in Thackeray losing most of the money that should have been his. From then on, he had no choice but to make a determined decision to forge his own path to make a living. Starting from the summer of 1832, Thackeray spent about 4 years in Paris, primarily focusing on studying painting and beginning to contribute articles to newspapers and magazines. Besides painting, in order to make ends meet, Thackeray wrote a multitude of works under various pen names, covering a wide range of subjects including short stories, essays, travelogues, prose, news reports, and political commentary. Despite accepting commissioned work from various sources and personally editing magazines, he never managed to carve out his own niche in the literary world. In his early years, Thackeray lacked patience, often shifting his life ambitions quickly. However, from another perspective, this also illustrated his wide-ranging interests. After 4 years of studying art in Paris, his painting skills reached a considerable level, prompting him to offer his services to his contemporary and the then most popular British author, Charles Dickens, to illustrate his novels. Fortunately for Thackeray, Dickens preferred the works of other artists, otherwise, we might not have had the chance to read a masterpiece like Vanity Fair today. In 1848, Vanity Fair was published. Initially, its sales were moderate, but it gained strong momentum, gradually propelling the middle-aged Thackeray from a third-rate writer languishing at the bottom of the literary pyramid to the ranks of first-rate authors. Vanity Fair was serialized in 20 installments from January 1847 to July 1848. The title is derived from the seminal work The Pilgrim's Progress by the 17th-century British writer John Bunyan. In Bunyan's book, the term Vanity Fair refers to a town through which a group of people pass on their journey to gain wisdom, a town that perpetually sells all kinds of worldly vanities at its marketplace, including houses, lands, professions, honors, titles, kingdoms, desires, and various pleasures. It is also frequented by morally questionable individuals such as swindlers, gamblers, ruffians, and villains. A subtitle of Vanity Fair that should not be overlooked is A Novel Without a Hero. This subtitle, in connection with the origin of the title, suggests that the novel is a satirical work. The author's intent is not to tell a story or create traditionally heroic characters, but to depict the panorama of British high society from around 1810 to the early Victorian era, satirizing a group of individuals who are indifferent to everything except their own self-interests. The novel revolves around two women who grew up together from childhood: Amelia Sedley, born into a wealthy middle-class family, with a gentle and kind nature, yet weak and uninteresting, and Becky Sharp, from a humble background, whose mother is a French opera singer. Becky is clever, resourceful, and opportunistic, with a strong survival instinct but extreme selfishness. The story of Vanity Fair begins on the day when these two women set out together in a carriage to leave their boarding school. Becky temporarily stays at Amelia's home, coinciding with the return from India of Joseph Sedley, Amelia's obese and sluggish brother. Becky sees an opportunity to marry Joseph for his wealth, but her plans ultimately fail. After leaving Amelia's home, Becky becomes a governess in the Crawley household. After Lady Crawley's death, Sir Pitt Crawley proposes to Becky, only to discover that she has secretly married his younger son, Rawdon Crawley, causing a furious outburst. Marrying a woman of low birth like Becky causes Rawdon to forfeit his inheritance rights to his wealthy spinster aunt's estate. As time goes on, Amelia's family faces financial difficulties due to her father's bankruptcy, and her engagement to the young officer George is put on hold. George has a loyal and kind-hearted friend in the army named Dobbin, who also loves Amelia. However, Dobbin, being loyal and selfless, resolves not to compete with George for Amelia's affections. Moreover, he earnestly assists in their marriage plans during a time of crisis, generously contributing both money and effort, finally bringing about their union. Typically, at this point in the story, readers may begin to feel anxious. In the face of the timeless crucible of changing family fortunes, the fragility of emotions and marriages, and the assessment of personal character are all laid bare, yet the men and women caught in the whirlwind remain oblivious. They will need to stumble a few more times in the mortal coil before gaining insight into the truths of life. Just as Amelia and Becky embarked on their marriages with their respective husbands, a momentous event unfolded in Europe, the Battle of Waterloo. Rawdon, George, and Dobbin set off for the battlefield. Ironically, merely 6 weeks into his marriage, George attempted to have an affair with Becky, but the war thwarted his plans. Tragically, George fell in battle, becoming a martyr who gave his life for his country. After the war's conclusion, Rawdon's promotion due to his valor led him to Paris, where he took Becky and their son. Amelia also gave birth to a son, becoming a widow and struggling with hardships. Over the next decade, the lives of the two ladies underwent further changes. Becky enjoyed a life of ease and frequented gatherings of the upper class, even earning an audience with the king. Meanwhile, Amelia's circumstances worsened. Her family's financial situation did not improve, and she faced constant disapproval from her father-in-law. Eventually, she was even stripped of her right to be with her last surviving child. Years later, during a journey across the European continent, Dobbin, Amelia, and her brother Joseph encountered Becky. By this time, Becky had fallen from grace and was no longer the triumphant figure of the past. Her extramarital affair had been exposed, leading to her abandonment by her husband and society's rejection. Although she could still manipulate Joseph through her cunning ways, she found herself increasingly isolated. Dobbin's deep love for Amelia endured, and he provided both material and emotional support multiple times. However, Amelia expressed her lifelong commitment to her late husband George and could not accept Dobbin's affection. Fortunately, Becky's revelation to Amelia about George's proposal to elope before the Battle of Waterloo awakened her, and she finally realized her true feelings for Dobbin. As mentioned earlier, Thackeray also had considerable accomplishments in the field of painting. While not on par with the top illustrators of the time, his illustrations for Vanity Fair were of professional quality and complemented the text. Perhaps it was due to this skill that Thackeray's characters were so vivid, evoking a sense of both realism and caricature. This blend of realism and caricature stems from Thackeray's artistic treatment of the characters, subtly highlighting certain features through his skillful brushstrokes. Let's take Amelia as an example to appreciate Thackeray's profound character development. In contemporary terms, Amelia would be described as naive and sweet. She embodies innocence, fragility, and shyness, easily evoking men's protective instincts. Her perspective is limited, primarily revolving around domestic matters, with little interest in the wider world beyond her family and a few acquaintances. Playing the piano at home and chatting with friends constitute her entire realm of leisure activities. Immersed in domestic life, she fails to fulfill George's hopes for her social prominence, and cannot engage in meaningful communication with Dobbin, who admires her. Moreover, she lacks the ability to reflect upon most aspects of life. Observe Amelia's behavior in several instances in the book. When faced with disappointment, she bursts into tears. She is prone to self-deception, allowing her emotions to cloud her judgment, preventing her from seeing the true nature of George, Becky, and others. In summary, she is ill-equipped to navigate the ruthless realities of life. However, when it's said that the characters created by Thackeray possess a caricatured quality, it doesn't mean they are one-dimensional flat characters. Thackeray's treatment of his characters' emotions is complex. Let's use the character of Amelia as an example. In a letter to his confidant, Thackeray remarked that Amelia's prototype was neither you nor my mother, but my poor wife. Indeed, Thackeray's wife shared Amelia's simplicity and warmth, combined with a lack of intellectual complexity and a narrow perspective, making her a typical representation of Victorian-era housewives. Nonetheless, even in Vanity Fair, Amelia remains a positive character, and Thackeray approaches her depiction with tenderness. He often uses positive language to describe her, portraying her as having a kind and gentle heart, being a lovable little creature, and despite her timidity, having a tender, loving heart. Some critics interpret these words as deliberate irony, perhaps oversimplifying the intricately crafted characters Thackeray has created. Throughout Thackeray's entire writing career, the structure of Vanity Fair can be considered one of the most intricate. This work departs from the traditional model of using plot to achieve narrative completeness, instead opening up a novel approach, compact and coherent storytelling achieved through the contrast of different characters and their actions. Vanity Fair introduces numerous characters and spans a wide range of time and space, yet Thackeray's narrative is distinct and tightly woven, making it highly compressed when read. To better illustrate this point, let's compare the works of Thackeray and Dickens. While both authors have a multitude of characters in their novels, their narrative styles fundamentally differ. Regardless of the character being depicted, Thackeray's focus never strays from the subject at hand. His characters are like interlocking gears, where one movement inevitably sets others in motion. Dickens, on the other hand, tends to completely isolate the actions of one character from others. Thus, Thackeray's storytelling is notably concentrated. This may be attributed to his exceptional talent as a writer, coupled with his self-awareness as a critic. His keen critical perspective guides his writing, providing his work with a unique tension. Another distinctive feature of Vanity Fair is the presence of the narrator, or rather, the author, who occasionally steps on stage within the text. In other words, Thackeray not only subtly incorporates his own personality into the characters' dialogues and actions, but he goes a step further. The narrator of the novel appears as if a stand-up comedian, personally engaging with the readers. Throughout various parts of the book, the narrator often steps forward from behind the scenes to the forefront, offering witty commentary on human affairs, citing references, or engaging in humorous discussions about writing techniques. These interjections, sometimes spanning entire paragraphs, while not essential to the plot's development, endow Vanity Fair with tremendous charm. Through these semi-jocular, semi-serious asides, Thackeray bridges the gap between the author and the reader, imbuing the novel to some extent with the essence of ancient oral literature. In Vanity Fair, the narrator maintains an appropriate distance from the characters within the book. In the narrator's perspective, whether they are main characters like Amelia, Becky Sharp, Rawdon Crawley, or relatively minor figures like Joseph Sedley and Sir Pitt Crawley, they are akin to puppets manipulated by performers. The world in which they move resembles a stage play, and while the narrator occasionally steps forward to the scene, they ultimately remain in the position of an observer. Meanwhile, the author's viewpoint is not omniscient. Their material is strictly limited to what their eyes can see, and when considering and commenting, it stems from what they perceive, ensuring credibility for the reader. Characters in Thackeray's writings are usually ordinary individuals from the upper echelons of British society. Even when writing about historically significant figures, Thackeray refrains from portraying them as overly great within his works, maintaining a sense of realism. As mentioned earlier, in his early writing career, Thackeray experimented with a wide range of genres, including a substantial body of essays. These works were characterized by their radical viewpoints and sharp language, with a clear commonality: a pursuit of truth. Vanity Fair takes aim at the prevailing idealism in Britain at the time. Thackeray staunchly aligns himself with the side of realism. In his view, a novelist is akin to a scientist, seeking to reveal the truth to the audience. The fictional worlds created by novelists through their imagination should strive to mirror the real world. In the preface to another representative work, Pendennis, Thackeray wrote, "The author's sole purpose in composing this book has been to leave no effort unexerted in telling the truth." This can likewise be regarded as the fundamental motivation behind his creation of Vanity Fair. Oscar Wilde once said that when a work is met with criticism, the only thing worse than criticism is no criticism at all, as it indicates a lack of attention. From a contemporary perspective, the unquestionable classic status of Vanity Fair in British literary history is evident. However, at the time of its publication, opinions regarding its literary value were varied. While positive evaluations predominated, negative assessments also deserve consideration. This debate is helpful in gaining a deeper understanding of the literary landscape of the time when Vanity Fair emerged. Art critic Elizabeth Rigby recognized the value of the book early on, noting that Thackeray portrayed himself as a medieval court jester, enabling him to candidly express the truth. The greatest merit of Vanity Fair, she argued, lies in it being less a novel than a literary daguerreotype, using wit and talent to project early 19th century manners and customs onto paper. Thackeray's skillful depiction of the unsavory aspects of the British upper class's materialistic and opportunistic nature earned him a prominent epithet in newspapers: snobbish slayer Thackeray. The book also received acclaim in the United States. However, among the negative appraisals, scholar Richard Whately's wording stands out for its intensity, his eccentric metaphor remaining unforgettable. In his view, Vanity Fair is utterly nauseating, akin to eating a dish that consists of a tobacco-stuffed fox, covered with whale oil. That being said, the perspective of another British literary giant, Thomas Carlyle, appears more balanced. While initially disliking the satirical tone of Vanity Fair, Carlyle, upon closer reflection, had to acknowledge that Thackeray's novel was more thought-provoking and realistic than Dickens's works, making it worthy of deeper contemplation. Vanity Fair granted Thackeray an unparalleled and solid literary status, becoming his best-selling and most enduring work. However, during its initial publication period, the book could be described as having garnered critical acclaim without achieving significant commercial success. It received positive reviews within the literary community, yet its market response was moderate. In fact, the fact that Vanity Fair did not become an instant sensation upon its debut is reasonable. Thackeray's narrative style in the novel is relatively calm, not devoid of passion, but often concealing his fervor beneath the surface. His insights into human nature and wisdom are subtly interwoven between the lines, requiring readers to pause and contemplate. For instance, consider the character of Rawdon Crawley. In the first half of the novel, he is portrayed as an amiable young man, while in the latter half, he transforms into an honest and steadfast middle-aged individual. Yet, despite the passage of time, his genuine affection for Amelia, which might appear somewhat foolish, remains unchanged. He is not only simple but also somewhat crude, and his words and actions in the novel even carry a touch of humor. However, upon closer examination, the author has invested deep emotions into this character, fundamentally due to his reverence for such a genuine gentleman. Additionally, Thackeray did not introduce sensational and suspenseful plotlines that would readily captivate the masses. Instead, he employed more intricate and sophisticated artistic techniques to captivate readers who were fortunate enough to discover his work. For readers contemporaneous with Thackeray, while he did write the popular work Vanity Fair, his literary reputation was maintained through continuously releasing new works. Some readers even preferred his later novels like Pendennis. However, for modern readers, the stature of Vanity Fair far surpasses his other works. Mentioning Thackeray's name often triggers thoughts of Vanity Fair. The very qualities that may have hindered his popularity during his lifetime, such as his objective viewpoint, subdued tone, and concealed passion, have now become the captivating traits that attract contemporary readers to this work. In terms of character development, even with Thackeray's masterful storytelling, he never managed to create characters as deeply embedded in the hearts of readers as Amelia and Becky Sharp. Moreover, in the conclusion of the novel, while Amelia and Dobbin ultimately find happiness, the treacherous and malicious character of Becky Sharp is not subjected to harsh retribution. This serves as another ingenious aspect of Thackeray's craftsmanship. In determining the fates of his characters, he takes an unconventional approach, eschewing conventional notions of karma and retribution, and refrains from forcibly inserting them into his masterpiece. Alright, let's recap the key points of this issue's content. 1. Thackeray's writing career started not too late, but it took many years of mediocrity before he made a mark in the literary world at the age of 40. He can be considered a late-blooming writer. What changed his destiny was the publication of Vanity Fair in 1848. 2. The subtitle of Vanity Fair is a novel without a hero. The main purpose of this satirical novel is not to tell a conventional story or create traditional heroic characters, but to depict a panoramic view of the early 19th century British upper-class society and satirize those who are indifferent to everything except their own immediate interests. 3. Thackeray also excelled in the field of drawing and painting. Perhaps it was due to this talent that his characters are so vivid. They feel real to readers while also possessing a cartoon-like quality. 4. The structure of Vanity Fair is intricate, as it introduced a novel approach, compact and coherent narration achieved through contrasting the actions of different characters. 5. Another distinctive feature of Vanity Fair is the narrator, or rather the author, who occasionally appears in the narrative. The author not only subtly incorporates their personality into the characters' dialogues and actions but also directly engages with the reader. These occasional asides, sometimes spanning entire paragraphs, lend tremendous charm to the text of Vanity Fair. 6. Following its publication, Vanity Fair received generally positive reviews, cementing Thackeray's unprecedented and solid literary status. The book became his best-selling and most enduring work. However, it had a somewhat slow start in terms of commercial success, primarily due to Thackeray's relatively subdued narrative style. Well, that concludes the content for this episode. If you enjoyed my video, please click like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thank you.